Good afternoon, Mr. President. Nice to see you again.
Радий також вас знову бачити.
Happy
Доброго
to see
дня.
you as well. Good day.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with the Times of India. It's a real privilege and honor for us. So without further ado, let me ask you the first question of our interview.
Yes, sure.
Mr. President, my first question to you is, what do you think about the recent BRICS summit in Russia and PM Modi saying that he is ready to work for peace at this summit?
Дякую за запитання.
Thank you for your question. First and foremost, I think that the BRICS summit failed. It was a failure. First of all, not everyone was even looking at today's composition of BRICS. We couldn't see many leaders who Russia was relying upon in BRICS itself, besides the guests. Saudi Arabia was not there at the level of the leader, so it witnesses that there is no unity in BRICS. I think that BRICS itself is separated by Putin himself, by his policy of war. And again, I think that he wants to polarize the world and to divide it into so-called West and BRICS Plus, West Plus and BRICS Plus. So as of today, he failed to do that because of different reasons. I think that first of all, because everybody understands that he is a murderer, that he is a terrorist, and that today this is just a cheaper energy resource. And some of the states are using that. But even the states which understand that they can equalize their economy don't want to, in fact, spoil this process for themselves with Putin. This is what I see as of today. Also, Putin is not that consecutive, and even the proposals of Brazil and China, which were very formal. Why formal? Because they are more political emphasis, not very specific plan. But even those proposals of Brazil and China obviously couldn't be taken by Putin from the perspective of the territorial integrity. And for China, I would say it is the slap on the face. Yes, this is the slap on the face for China and Brazil. And that is why Brazil was also not present at the level of the leader from BRICS. So BRICS, in fact, did not take place. As for instance, the Secretary General of the United Nations, I think that altogether this is kind of a surrealistic thing. It is not only about the United Nations, it's about many other countries. I think that you cannot just say today that you are neutral in the war. You cannot say that any country is neutral in the war between Russia and Ukraine. You cannot be neutral because it would mean that you are on the side of Russia. Neutrality really helps just for Russian Federation. Between the aggressor and the victim, there cannot be neutrality. And I consider, this is a kind of a hidden support of Russia. And I think that the ones who were present there and were speaking about their neutrality, that they were saying that they would like to help to solve the conflict, in my opinion, they look more pro-Russian. And that means it's not about peace, because Russia started this war and is going on with it. Then it means that it is about the war. And whether they want it or not, whether they understand it or not, that is not important, in fact. This is the fact. Neutrality in this war means support of Russia. This is the war. After all of the victims, after all of the tortures, deportations of children, as of today, this is how it looks. And as for the second part of your question about the position of Prime Minister Modi,
I asked, the Prime Minister Modi expressed his desire to work for peace in the context of the Ukraine war at the summit. So, what do you think about that?
Я вважаю, що будь-які
I think that any
питання
questions
сьогодні вони
today,
не повинні закінчуватись
they
словами.
shouldn't end with words
Моді
only.
є прем'єр-міністром дуже великої
Modi
держави.
is the prime minister of a really huge country. And from the perspective of the number of population and the volume of impact, influence, economy, and so on, I shouldn't list that because you know that very well. Such country cannot just say that it is interested in the end of the war. We are all interested in that. All of the leaders will tell you tomorrow that they would like to end the war, even the enemy of this notion of peace, Putin, he even will say that he wants peace. This is a very common thing, especially for such a huge country as India is. Modi, Prime Minister Modi, can influence the end of the war. This is the huge value of him in any conflict. This is a huge value of India. 1.5 billion of population, which really has influence onto that, real influence. Blocking of Russian economy, blocking of cheap energy resource, blocking of the defense industrial complex and so on of Russian Federation will lead to the decrease of the capacities of Russia to wage wars. In the short time perspective, in their war against us, against the strengthening of their army, then about the G20. G20 is considered the great 20 because they are the main economies of the world. And the whole world is always depending on this, whether the war is supported, how the war is fed. And this is just economy, this is just money, this is the financial resource and the people. That is why 20 great economies can just easily, I'm sure, put Putin at his place to end the war. They can do that not just incentivizing it, but vice versa, to slow down all of his desires. And you don't need to say we would like peace. You need to act, because daily war is killing people.
Mr. President, but many would argue that sanctions haven't stopped Russia, and that if you have more sanctions, then it will really cripple the global economy. So in this kind of a situation, how do you convince countries to your point of view?
Sanctions are working. Sanctions have led to effect. And if the great economies of the world, by the way, like India, like China, like Turkey, and other countries, which did not pose sanctions against Russia, if they did not help Russia, if they wouldn't help Russia to survive in the war, I mean in economically, they helped Russia to earn money. Sometimes even understanding that the energy resource for such huge countries could be of market price, and its use of the war times, when the humanity is just using its inhumane. And if those countries reevaluate their values, then the sanctions would be functioning fully. Now they are working only partially because the world is implementing them partially.
Mr. President, everyone is looking to the US elections, and there are some, thoughts that maybe after the US elections, there can be a possibility of a ceasefire in the war. So do you think that is a possibility at all, or after the US elections, or that is a ceasefire is still off the table?
For the question, so many things depend on the policy of the United States of America. And it seems to me that This is not deep enough analysis when we say that everything depends on the US elections. Many things depend, but not everything. The beginning of war in Ukraine and that our nation stood against the enemy, let me remind you, without the support of allies, including the United States. Our unity of people of Ukraine, of Ukrainian population, our society, this is what in fact repelled the attack of the Russians, stopped them. But deoccupation, of course, we wouldn't be able without the support. At least it would be really hard because of human losses. That is why we are so grateful for all of the allies for help and support. But still, not everything depends on the US elections. Let me emphasize many things, but not everything. The policy is changed not only by the leader. We don't know who will become the US president, but undoubtedly the bipartisan support of Ukraine will stay. And the Congress of the United States, in any case, which we are cooperating with and have developed strong connections, will have its personal influence, impact onto this war, in spite of whoever is the president. Though the president definitely will shape the foreign policy because it's his or her constitutional obligation. And undoubtedly, if the policy of the United States changes and the US would say we do not support Ukraine in its sovereign and just protection of its territories, undoubtedly it will be really hard for us. But this is if the policy totally changes, then we will think what to do with that. Definitely not now. We'll think on that only then. Another argument, we shouldn't forget that Europe is the powerful continent on its own. And we shouldn't forget, and India and China shouldn't forget about that. In spite of the fact that India and China are great economies, still Europe is the economy which is 5 times bigger than the Russian economy. I mean 5 times bigger only by population and dozens of times bigger economically. So the population of 120 million, this is a more attractive market. So we need to understand that the United States of America have 2 times fewer population than the population of Europe. And we need to understand that Europe, as it is, when it is not separate, it is powerful. And it is also important for us to preserve this unity in Europe and not to change the policy of Europe about this war. This is the second aspect. And the third aspect about the ceasefire, what you said, we need to understand with you that we are against the frozen conflict. We don't want the third war, because in 2014, one war started and our territories were occupied. In 2022, the full-scale war started. Though before 2022, we used to have a frozen conflict. There was a ceasefire already. There was Normandy and Minsk processes, where thousands of negotiations with Russia and other partners in different platforms. And then the full-scale war. So if now we freeze the conflict, without the proper understanding what will happen tomorrow, which guarantees of security the Ukrainian people will have, our children will have, then I think that it is a huge risk, a very high risk. Everything should be done on paper, it should be comprehensible, how this war ends and who and how much will bear responsibility for it. Definitely the aggressor will do that. Definitely the aggressor.
Right. Mr. President, you recently revealed your victory plan, and which has several elements, including quick membership, NATO membership for Ukraine. But many countries are divided on your victory plan. Do you think your victory plan is workable? Is it practical, or is it just a bargaining chip?
План перемоги не є
The
темою
victory
перемовин
plan
з
is
Російською
not the
Федерацією.
bargaining chip or the topic of negotiations with Russia. And we can confuse it. The victory plan is not the platform for the response of all of the countries of the world. The victory plan is the plan of strengthening of Ukraine now and today. Strengthening of Ukraine in front of before having these or those diplomatic formats or formats of negotiations, this or that peace summit, all of that should happen before, so that the Ukraine could be strong. And that is why this victory plan is given to the countries who are ready to strengthen Ukraine. It is not the talk with Russia, because Russia is not making us stronger, it's making us weaker. It is not a proposal for negotiations. This is the request, a very specific one. I shouldn't ask in my plan of victory as for the invitation to NATO. I would like the people not to mess it up. The first point is not NATO membership. It's not the quick membership of NATO. The first point is invitation to NATO, so that in the future nobody could change their opinion and could be really consecutive. That everything shouldn't be just in the words, but documented in papers fundamentally and legally, because the invitation, not the membership, because during the war we cannot become NATO members, obviously. We will never make everyone make it during the war. And this invitation, this point, is only for the NATO countries, because we would like to be invited to NATO, not any other alliance. So that is for them. The victory plan has the second point, that is strengthening of Ukrainian army with the weapons today at the battlefield, not tomorrow. We are not talking with Putin about that, and not anybody else, not the countries of global south who do not strengthen us with weapons today. We speak about that with Rammstein countries, the countries which helped Ukraine with weapons during this conflict. The point number 3 is just for the package of deterrence of Russia. It does not mean the use of missiles. However, it would be just, because Russia is using missiles against us. But we are saying it's not about the use of missiles, but about deterrence of Russian Federation. This is the package of the long-range weapons which Ukraine will not use if Russia stops the war against us, stops the aggression against us, stops killing our people. And that is why this package of long-range weapons should be in Ukraine. This is the prevention measure of weapons. This is the warning for Russia. Stop killing people. Stop. The aggressor needs to stop. And that is why this plan, this point of the plan, is not for everyone, and not even for all of the countries of Rammstein. This point is only for those countries who have certain types of weapons, who have and who is ready to give it to Ukraine. The fourth point, economic one, is about the ones who are interested in the investment into Ukraine and to protect mineral resources of Ukraine and to create businesses in the future together with Ukraine. The fifth point is about just security of European continent, and that is why this is the post-war point. It tells us what will happen after the war with the Ukrainian army as the part of the security of Europe, and it is about exclusively Europe, only Europe. So it is not the plan which will end the war, where we would unite the whole world. This is the plan of victory, which leads us to the plan of the war end. This is the plan of strengthening of Ukraine.
Mr. President, I would like to know what is the position of the war as of now. Coming, many people say that you will face a tough few months ahead. So, what is the position of the war as of now?
Well, this is the third hard winter for Ukraine and Ukrainian people. Russia is doing the same every year of this war. We are studying how to protect ourselves. Russia attacked the energy sector since the very beginning to create chaos in Ukraine, and people didn't have anything to eat. So that the people would starve, so that the people would be ill, and without having the opportunity to provide insulation and winterization of their houses, so that the people would die. We, as the state, started oppose that. We restored our energy system. We are protecting step by step. We are strengthening the protection of our energy system, and we don't let the Russian Federation just to kill our people. Gradually, we coped with that. After their attacks against our energy system, we know how to respond to their energy, but we do that really cautiously. We never targeted the people, we never targeted the schools or universities, and they do that. And then they felt what? That Ukraine can respond. In those missiles, in those drones, none of the partners helped us in these weapons. This is what we done alone in this response, unfortunately. Unfortunately. I think that it is not just, it is not fair. As for the battlefield, you are right, Russia has more people and more weapons. In many directions, technologically, we are better than them already. And many partners agree with that, especially in the technologies, in the drones, in the long-range drones and systems of electronic warfare and others. But it's not enough, because the most important is to save the human being. So we look at the battlefield how to save a person. We can lose equipment, we can lose technologies, but we should minimize the human losses. And sometimes by the price of these or those meters or kilometers of land. Yes, the human being, the person is more important than the land, though this is justly our land. But our land will be brought back later, but we will not be able to bring back the human being. And this is how we live this, according to this law. It is hard to be at war with Russia by this law, because they have the only law. If they are not attacking, if they are not in the offensive, they are shot by Russians. The Russians are killed by Russians. Russia killed many mobilized soldiers itself by Russian army, just because soldiers were afraid to attack, to perish under the bullets, or to be wounded. So they retreated, and this is where they were killed by their army. This is their law of war. They don't quantify, they don't calculate the numbers. They have approximately 650,000 of victims already, killed and wounded in Russia. Approximately 650,000. Just imagine. That is a lot. Because they don't calculate the people who died. And you know what's really scary? That the same happens now. They don't they don't retrieve the bodies. Their bodies are rotting in the land. They don't take the bodies from the land, from the battlefield. This is the face of today's Russia, today's Putin, the face of the war. And what's more interesting, yes, they are having gains in the East just because of that, because of this meat grinder, because they are throwing bodies onto us. But when we came to Kursk region and had a preventive attack against their territory, because they wanted to have a separate operation and to occupy the north, we can see that they are attacking on their own territory. They are themselves killing their civilians, which were not living, which were left in their own home. on the territory of Kursk region. And our people are giving them food, water, because they are civilians, not soldiers. And our soldiers are giving away and sharing what they have. And we can see the bodies of the civilians, of Russians, who are shot by Russian artillery. This is the war.
Right. Mr. President, when Prime Minister Modi was in Kyiv, he, along with you, visited the martyrologist exposition dedicated to, the fallen children of this war. So, can you detail the overall impact of the war on Ukrainian children?
Well, first of all, I thank Prime Minister Modi that he joined me and commemorated the perished children. You know, the real number of children who were killed, well, nobody knows the real number. Unfortunately, we can definitely state that dozens of thousands of children were deported and just kidnapped. But how many of them are killed? We will get to know about that only after the war. Dozens of thousands of deported children, thousands with changed names and surnames. And they were forced to speak a different language. They were forced, some of them, who were teens, in their teens, they graduated from the schools during the invasion, and many of them are now sent to the war against their own country. This is just a horror. Their relatives don't have their children back. And unfortunately, if dozens of thousands were kidnapped, then less than 1,000 was brought back. And that's what's very important, so that the coalition of the children's comeback was joined by many countries, including India. We would really like India to help with that. Today, the coalition is working with more of 40 countries, and they will work on that on and on. But really, unfortunately, not that many countries managed to bring back our children. This is just a tiny number in comparison with an overall number of kidnapped children. This is what is taking place with the children. Besides that, many children were affected in Ukraine. The schools were hit, the universities were hit, where there were wounded children who lost their limbs. There were many children who were killed. A huge number of children left with their parents abroad. You know that abroad, more than 7 million of Ukrainians are now abroad. A big number of them are children. Their parents are staying sometimes here. Their, for instance, father, the men in the family were left here or at the front line. They are at the war, and those children are deprived of their children. Some of their fathers have been dying at the war. This is the situation.
Mr. President, I would like to ask you, what can India do specifically for Ukrainian children and to help bring back the forcibly deported Ukrainian children?
You can join the coalition of the bring back of children. You can support our communique of the peace summit, because the third point was about the bringing back of children. You can call Putin and ask him who he is. You can force him bring the children back. Prime Minister Modi can do that. He has really huge influence. He can just say specifically how many Ukrainian children will be given to me so that I could bring them back to Ukraine. Just say say that directly. Give me 1,000 of children which will be brought back to Ukraine. This is the real step. He took dozens of thousands. Let Prime Minister Modi bring back only 1,000 at least. And if every such influential person as Prime Minister Modi is able to bring back 1,000, we'll be able to bring back the majority of our children. That's what's needed to be done. You need to raise this issue at the meeting of G20. India can invite us to this meeting as well, together with Brazil. So the G20 could divide the obligations. If 20,000 of Ukrainian children are deported, every leader should take the responsibility to bring back 1,000 of children. It's not just to sit at the table during the summit, but to really help the children. The world should be helped.
But Mr. President, the ICC has already issued arrest warrants for the forcible deportation of Ukrainian children. But those warrants, as we saw recently with Mongolia, they were not implemented. So do you still have faith in international mechanisms to help you bring back the children?
We believe just in the international law. We believe in the international influence of the leaders. We believe in the international mechanism. You're right, just one mechanism, just one international criminal court cannot fully correct the situation. It cannot fully influence Putin and his allies, but all of them together, the ICC, the leaders, the international law, the United Nations, G20, all together can definitely end this war. But the results of the ICC are still felt. Putin is not traveling into the majority of the world countries. We can see that. The majority of the leaders who acknowledged and approved the Rome Statute and still acknowledge the verdict of the ICC, the majority of them try not to visit Putin as well. There is a result, and still it will be written. Because this is the first case, we have evidence, we have many other cases, and there will be much more evidence. This is what's, in my opinion, is done. And as for Mongolia, again, Mongolia emphasized that, unfortunately, it is not an independent country.
Mr. President, finally, I would like to ask you that, given that, as you said, Prime Minister Modi has expressed several times his desire to facilitate peace. So do you think there is any possibility that Prime Minister Modi can host negotiations between Ukraine and Russia?
Well, as for the Prime Minister Modi, we have the platform. This is the Peace Summit. And I think that we could conduct the Peace Summit, the second Peace Summit. It could be conducted in any respected capital city, where, and we communicated with the Prime Minister that it could be in Delhi or in any other city. Undoubtedly, it can be in India. And the Prime Minister Modi can really do that. He can organize the certain summit. But for that, we need to prepare ourselves. We would like so that those proposals of any countries could be heard. And the proposals of India and European Union and African continent. So please, if Brazil or China would like to see us as well, and they have proposals, please, but only according to our format, because the war is in our land. So I think that such summit can be hosted in India.
Times of India videos, your daily dose of India and the world. Global news, different views, and sharp analysis.
Pressure of expectation from your fans, your supporters. that has often served as a backdrop for several Bollywood.
You're not a brute majority anymore. If you individually take out data,
Making sense of global conflicts. Tracking the new emerging world order.
strike on Israeli military bases.
A multi-pronged.
To stay out of harm's way as Israel started bombing targets across.
Understanding changing alliances in a polarized world. Tune into TOI videos for all this and more. Click on the bell icon to subscribe and never miss an update.